right, we are live. Joining in. Welcome everyone. As you're joining in, do type in as to where you're joining in from. See a couple of familiar names here. Welcome to the webinar. As you're signing in, do type in the chat as to where you're joining in from. Okay, Bangalore. Welcome. All right. So welcome everyone. I'm Smita R, Director of Sales and Administration, a trainer and mentor coach at Kocharya. I see a lot of familiar faces, like I said, and some are also looking new. For all those who are considering, joining in, considering to join our coach training program for level 1, there are a couple of programs coming in. And also for those who are already ACCs and you want to upgrade to BCC, Cindy and Tracy are starting one level 2 with a specialization on somatic coaching. And in case, this term somatic coaching is intriguing you, Tracy would be very happy to have a chat with you and answer any specific questions that you have. We have another interesting program for advanced coaches coming up, which is on coaching supervision. And we are one of the first few to be conducting the specialized program. It is by Kocharya founder Ramanathan, starting on March 31st. So Dens will be posting all the upcoming program links here on the chat. And in case you miss the links, if you miss to save those links, you can visit our website and you'll get a detail of all the programs. Also, you can write to us at support@kocharya.com and we will be happily sending you all the details. In case you do not see programs suitable for your time zone, do email us and let us know, and we see how we can, start a program which is for your, for your time zone. Now, coming to the topic for today, Kocharya is proud to present as a part of its Mastermind Mentor Leader webinar series. This will be conducted on the first Wednesday of the month. Do watch out for this space and for some interesting topics and guests who come and teach us, and we get to learn from them, from their experiences. Today, we are going to kickstart this webinar series with two corporate veterans, Saurav Adhikari and Ganesh Srinivasan. You can see them on the screen along with me. The Mentor-Mind Master Leader series provides great learning to corporate executives on the practical aspects of how coaching and mentoring can be applied powerfully to enhance corporate performance with people engagement. Let me take a moment to introduce Saurav. Saurav is a senior global business leader with 4 decades of deep domain expertise in global business markets across technology, FMCG, and consumer durables sectors as an operations, general management, and investment specialist. A former Hindustan Unilever and HCL veteran, now on the board of several institutions, including Z and Shiv Nadar University, and founder of Indus Tech Hedge Fund. You can see the background of Saurav. He'll be in a fireside chat with another veteran corporate leader, Ganesh Srinivasan. Ganesh is President Transmission and Distribution at KEC International, a USD 2 billion company and a part of the RPG Harsh Goenka group. He's been in the leadership positions in Tata Power, McKinsey and Company, and Cummins. He's a graduate of IIT Madras, Purdue University, and ISB Hyderabad. During his time at Tata Power, he got the opportunity to attend a leadership development program from Ahmedabad and benefited from the coaching intervention with Saurav. And I'm sure in the next 50 minutes in the conversation that we see between Saurav and Ganesh, we are going to learn more about from their learning experiences. So with that, I would like to hand over to Saurav and Ganesh. A very warm welcome, Saurav and Ganesh. And,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Smita.
Thank you, Smita, and thank you for your generous introductions for both, Ganesh and I. But before I start, I want to just tell you a little story that, it was interesting. I got into this whole area of, I don't want to call it coaching or mentoring. Let's just call this whole interactive process which helps develop human capital. We take financial capital for granted, those of who are from finance or accounting, and we think that in a business, if you can invest money, that's what growth is all about. Very rarely do we actually acknowledge the potential of human capital. And what we try to do, whether you call it mentorship or coaching or HR or any other term, I think at the end of the day, the most powerful resource we have, even in the age of AI, is human capital. So to me, let me start with that. And when I embarked on this journey after I left HCL, I'd been, inadvertently or by design, coaching or mentoring a bunch of people who were either ready for senior positions or were in the process of being identified. Sometimes we identified them ourselves. And at that time, Tata Power, where Ganesh was working, reached out to me and said, "Look, there's this bright young person who's going to, make waves in the industry, and of course, he has so far already." And we turned out meeting pre-COVID. And through much of this period that we actually interacted, it was COVID. And our physical interactions are few. So one of the things I do want to mention is that when we are talking about coaching, mentorship, leadership, and the development of human capital, it can be done in various forms. A formal way is to sit with each other, look at tools and processes. A lot of it is informal. So I would like to start by just saying that leadership is nothing but enhancing the potential of a human being to achieve certain goals which are defined, right? It can't just be loose. You can be a philosopher and be loose, be a spiritual leader and be loose. But in the context of business, where all of you are today joining this conversation, you have to be tight. You have to have a vision. You have to have some plans and goals, and leadership has to appear in that context. So let me hand it back to Ganesh and say, look, Ganesh, were you surprised that you were chosen for this particular assignment, so to speak, by Tata Power when you were there? And what was your first feeling about all of this?
Yeah, thanks, Saurav. Yes, I wouldn't say I was surprised, but I should say it was a pleasant surprise that I got this opportunity to be mentored. I didn't know who it would be, who the mentor would be at that time, but just the opportunity to explore along with a fellow professional how I can develop further both as a individual as a professional. I think it was a welcome opportunity at that time. And anyway, we were I was personally also going through a transition, right? As you mentioned, yes, it was COVID, so of course there was one layer of transition or change or uncertainty, one can say in that. But I also had moved within Tata Power from a role, an operational role in Mumbai to a much larger role in Delhi. So there was a change or a transition that I was going through, and I felt it would be helpful because I was in a new situation. It had much more, I would say, external exposure with stakeholders. So there were elements, and maybe we talk about that further as we go through this discussion. So it came at the right time for me. I was going through a transition, and I felt it would be very beneficial to have a sounding board to get guidance from somebody who has gone through multiple similar journeys in his or her career. So I was surprised, pleasantly surprised. I was fortunate, I would say, and kind of thankful to Tata Power for giving me that experience at that time.
So thank you, Ganesh. I mean, I must mention to all our listeners and viewers here who are on this program that during this whole process, it was one of comfort. I mean, as much as I was asked to come and assess and meet Ganesh, Ganesh had the opportunity to assess me. We met at the Hyatt Hotel just before a COVID outbreak. I think the end of 2020, 2019, early 2020. And it was important. So in this whole process, I want to emphasize that when you talk about mentorship or coaching someone to achieve, or develop as a leader, it's very important. The comfort element is extremely important. And I thought you may want to mention something about that, Ganesh. I mean, for me, it was not just an assignment. I mean, there are people who you can develop and it takes an effort. And there's some people who are naturally amenable. obviously Ganesh fell into the category of being highly evolved and, coming from a very distinguished background, from an IIT, ISB, McKinsey background. He was a natural leader who I felt needed just honing. There are others who need a lot more work. But maybe you want to talk about what got you comfortable about me, and I just don't mean me as a person. What would make a coachee or a mentee more comfortable with a mentor or a coach?
Yeah. So I think, as you said, we got an opportunity to meet before the formal. It was kind of a warm up interaction that we had before the formal process kind of began to get comfortable with each other. So I think for me, the most important aspect, or let's say three things that were important for me. One was that you had gone through. I would say similar professional challenges, and you had been in organization like Levers, then HCL, part of the Shivnada group. So it was something that I wanted to kind of tap into your extensive experience that you had in global markets as well as working in a very professional setup like Levers. Right. So that was number one. Second is when I met you, the first thing or the important thing for me was that what we discussed was that you will not be prescriptive, right? It is more of a discovery. It's we I have to find the path which is relevant for me, and kind of the nudge or the guidance will be there. But it is a process of self discovery that I'll be on. And third, and this is not explicit, but I got a feel, or I got the confidence that uh, we will it is not just, as you said, it's not just an assignment, but yet that you're interested in me as an individual, right? And in quote unquote Ganesh, rather than Kochi number X, right? So I think that was the important aspect, that the faith that I got, that you are invested in me as an individual. Yes, we got connected through Tata Power, and that was a good thing. But the confidence that yes, it is a relationship that we can evolve or make stronger beyond the circumstance that we started off with. So I think these are the three things that I felt are important, or were important for me. Number one, your professional experience is relevant, or I can you can advise me, and your credibility in that advice makes it relevant for me to take stock of it. That's number one. Second, the fact that it's a self discovery process, that you gave me that confidence that it will not be judgmental, and that it will be more of a discovery path. And third, the faith that okay, it's me as an individual that you're going to help, not of course the organization is important, the backdrop and context, but the individual human connection, which is more important, that forms the stronger relationship.
No, thank you for saying that, Ganesh. But what I do want to emphasize to all the listeners and people who've logged in, and thank you, by the way, for logging in. And we want to make this fun. So we're going to open this up to questions at some point, and we'd love to hear more of that. Is that as this is not about an individual, it's not about me as a mentor or as a coach. It is about matching what the person who has been assigned to be built for a leadership role in future and the person who can enable it. So a mentor or a coach does not come and impose a rigid framework on all of this. And this is a good transition for me to talk about some of the process issues, because I think many of you here not just aspire to be leaders, but are probably aspiring to be coaches or mentors, and some of you will probably want to go to the next level, that there are tools and methodologies, right? Uh, One of the first things I do want to mention is that how did I get to know Ganesh? One aspect of his was the personal interaction. Great guy, tremendous to talk to. As I said, pedigree, excellent pedigree. All that makes it very easy. But I was equipped with one particular tool and the data from that tool, which was Hogan. Now, that's not to say that this discussion is about Hogan or Hogan is the only tool that's available, because you have to go above Hogan. But Hogan is one such tool, and there are plenty of such tools that are available to analyze someone. Now, everybody goes to an appraisal cycle in a corporate culture. But even inside corporate culture, sometimes you use Hogan, and there are many other tools that are available. But it gave me an insight into Ganesh, beyond our personal interactions, right? So I want to mention that there are tools and processes that are very, very important in all of this. From those listeners who have tuned in, who are wanting to evolve in your journey of leadership, please remember that a process of self-assessment, whether you use Hogan or you use any other feedback mechanism or you even use the HR processes, it's an extremely important tool to understand yourself and your needs. In this particular case, the same Hogan tool that was the tests that were administered to Ganesh was made available to me with full transparency, right? Everything, his strengths, his areas that he had to work on, and it was discussed very thoroughly. Every dimension of it discussed, and I'd encourage everyone, all of you, to think that that's very important. The second thing I do want to mention here, and I'd like Ganesh to comment on this, is unlike a lot of people at Kocharya, I am not a certified coach or a mentor. Not because I cannot get certified. I think I put in enough hours. I just didn't have at that time the time to go through that process, right? But as long as you have the empathy and you have an understanding of the tools and the methodologies, and sometimes the methodology is as simple as listening to the mentee. If you're at an open mind, which Ganesh alluded to, then you can absorb what he or she is telling you by way of what they need and what their challenges are, layer it with what the tools are that you have available with you, and use that to try and take the person to the next level of leadership development. I just want to emphasize this. This is not a tools discussion, but I just want to mention this to you. And I'm going to throw it back to Ganesh to tell me what he thinks about process and tools. You're an engineer after all, and you're a McKinsey guy, so I'm sure you have great faith in the formal processes as much as the informal one.
Yeah, so thanks, sir. So I think yes, I do. I do think the Hogan added a lot of value. The Hogan assessment, as you said, it can be Hogan, it can be something else. There are multiple other tools available, but it did give some structure to the whole exercise, and it gave enough pointers for us to explore. Now it was up to us what area to dive deeper depending on that feedback, and I would say the Hogan gave us some hard information, but in addition to that, there were two other aspects that added to the, let us say, the data points that are available to us, right? One, Saurav had a direct interaction with my reporting officer, Sanjay in that case, and our HR head, right, the chief HR officer of Tata Power. So that gave some qualitative input, which may not have been captured in the Hogan or may have come up in a slightly different nuance. So I think that was the second aspect of it, which gave some additional data points for us to chew on. And third, as we started the process, maybe it was a second or third interaction. By the second or third interaction, Saurav had also spoken to a few of my colleagues, people who report to me or who are peers to me, right? So I think that put together kind of made a 360-degree kind of picture for us to say, okay, what is it that we want to work on? And of course, ultimately it was up to us to decide what areas that we need to work, but it gave us reasonably good structure and information for us to move forward.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. And one of the things I do want to emphasize while we're here on this call, Ganesh, to those who are listening in, is that tools and processes are extremely important, and there should be no rigidity about what there is, because each one is only exposing a dimension of what we all are, right? The holistic picture can only emerge from a long period. So at this point, I think when we were interacting, Ganesh and I, Ganesh was very open, when we talked about this 360-degree feedback, because leadership at the end of the day is not just about you leading by sitting, by being on a pulpit and preaching or telling people how to do things because you believe and that's what it is, or an organization telling everybody down the line the command and control structure, the way it works in the army, from where, by the way, a lot of leadership and management wisdom has emerged. And from those interactions, I mean, firstly, the people who gave 360 feedback were extremely sensitive because Ganesh was their boss. And how would they give this feedback to me without my earning their trust? So the point again, what I'm emphasizing is that the mentor or the coach must assure people that whatever they are disclosing in confidence remains in confidence. Okay, and I know you heard of the thing that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but I'm not using an extreme example. But what I want to emphasize is that the comfort must be extremely high. There are certain things that must be disclosed, otherwise the organization which is sponsoring a leadership development, because it's not an individual one normally in this process, I'm talking about people who want to formally engage a mentor or a coach, they must be privy to some of the interactions, but not all of them. Because some of them must remain in a private zone, because mentoring and coaching belongs to the realm of as much the known as the unknown. And some of them must remain where it is. So there are many things that Ganesh and I discussed, and you should feel free to talk about some of them without even necessarily revealing all the details, which he knew, and he should have had the confidence not that I would not reveal them under any circumstances. And the people who report into him, direct reportees, actually gave me feedback brutally in some cases about what Ganesh was good at and what he wasn't good at. When I gave the feedback back to Ganesh, and he took it really well, and I think it was possibly helped. So maybe you can talk a little bit about this process, because there's so much top-down feedback that happens in most organizations and in most contexts. Very rarely is a bottom-up process happening, and till the 360-degree feedback doesn't happen, I don't think any of these processes are going to bear any fruit. Ganesh,
Yeah.
your thoughts?
Yeah. So as you rightly said, it's also the comfort that people have while sharing feedback, that it will be taken in the right spirit. So just as an example, one of my let's say people that I work with would have said. So as you said, I'm an engineer, so kind of have a habit, or let's say a tendency to get into details, perhaps sometimes over detail than what is necessary in a certain situation. So that would come up, and in a sense, it's not that the feedback that they, if an individual is reasonably perceptive, you can sense that uh, even without even without them speaking about it directly, you can sense the direction of their thought process of when they are comfortable or when they are not comfortable about a certain situation. And that feedback, when it is played back through a person like Saurav, then we can work on it, right? Of course, you kind of sense that yes, there are certain situations that one should not go into too much of detail, or one should give that kind of flexibility, freedom, empowerment
Correct.
to the team. But at times, old habits die hard, or you're not comfortable with the way certain issues are being addressed. So just to be doubly sure, you go into that. But then you get stuck in that kind of routine. So I think just recognizing that I am doing that once the feedback is given, just putting myself with that kind of open mindset that yes, this is something that is happening over and over again, and working on that. That I think was very helpful for me. The second aspect I would say is that not to guess where who probably gave that feedback, right? One have a lot of this second guessing about, okay, this may have come from XYZ person, this feedback may have come from that. Very tempting, kind of do it subconsciously perhaps, but I think that was something that I consciously, I think Saurav, you also kind of flagged it, that avoid, it's not going to help, right? It's not
Correct.
helpful. At the end of the day, the feedback is a gift, and it's up to me that whether I want to work on it. So yes, it's not that all feedback was workable, but I would say, let's say 50-60% of that, if we take it forward, I think that's the whole spirit of it. So I think those were the two aspects that I wanted to highlight from a bottom up aspect, not to try to guess where that feedback came from, and that makes it a little bit awkward. And secondly, when that feedback is given, then when you're going back into the work situation or normal situation, really trying to sense when we are going into that auto habit of whatever we are doing, right? So that is a second aspect that I wanted to flag.
So, we've talked a lot about these processes. I think process is something that we just should not forget, because it is important. There was the mutual self-assessments of each other. There was a Hogan report to aid me. There was the process of interaction that helped you build trust and comfort. There was a 360-degree feedback that we had established, and therefore was the basis of feedback for you for your improvement. We also added something called stop, start, continue, if you remember.
Yes, yes, yes.
And maybe you just may want to talk for a few minutes about two things, which I think everybody here on this webinar may be interested in. One is, and I'm not particularly talking about stop, start, continue. That's just one of many tools that you can have, but also the fact that you were very organized with every interaction to summarize it and put back what your development, whether your goal that you'd established, and what you'd achieved with every interaction, right?
Right.
That's an important thing for me to emphasize, and I cannot emphasize that enough, because the process of leadership development is to accept with humility that no one is perfect, one size doesn't fit all, and the fact that in a different context there are different leadership. Now, in this, and one follow-on thing I want to leave with you before I hand it back to you again, is you were operating in a very challenging environment, and not a lot of people know this here, that Tata Power is a joint venture in the Delhi. He was the CEO of the Delhi, the Tata Power
Institution.
venture,
Yeah.
and it had the government of Delhi as a partner, right? Now, that's not easy for those of you who worked in the government or with the government. So hugely challenging, and therefore a lot of the leadership thing we worked there that we did on was how do you manage a very difficult partner. So maybe a few thoughts on that, Ganesh.
Yeah. So maybe before I get into that, a little bit about most of my time I've been in Bombay, right? All my working life is
Right,
in Bombay. And as I said, the coaching intervention came just at the time when I moved from Bombay to Delhi or Mumbai to Delhi.
right.
So I had this whole assumption about a Delhi wala. For those who from India, they will connect that the assumptions one has, or Mumbaikars have assumptions about Delhi, Delhi guys have assumptions about Mumbai. So it was natural. So I've been all my life in Bombay, and so I was moving from Mumbai to Delhi in a role which required extensive government interaction, extensive stakeholder interaction with ministries, with government departments. So it was a role which it was a distribution company serving close to 20 lakh customers. So it really had a lot of let's say external interface, right? And my previous roles, whatever I had, whether it was in McKinsey or in Tata Power, I started off in strategy, then went into a role in transmission and distribution. Yes, it had some external interface, but not to the extent that was required in Delhi, right? So I think that whole change or transition, it was something that I was not confident about making that transition myself, right? Am I equipped as an individual, as a professional, to get stuff done through the government, have the patience, and basically run through the process. So that this was in this circumstance that I was. It was this coaching experience was very helpful for me, right? The other aspect I would say is that at the time when we started the coaching experience, the first thing up after the Hogan and the interactions, and we kind of got the overall context, was to define what goals that I will have for professionally for my organization. Since I was the CEO of the subsidiary unit, so what are the professional goals, or what are the targets, or what are the aspirations that I want to have for the company as a whole, as an organization, and what aspirations I want to have for myself as an individual, complementing this organizational goal. And it is in that context that Smita, as you refer the CCSS framework, or what Saurabh introduced me to stop, start, continue, I found it to be incredibly helpful, because stop, start, continue in the context of achieving something for the organization, stop, start, continue in the context of making a transition individually, right? So it's not stop, start, continue in a vacuum, right? So I think that was important, that we defined, let's say, a goal, a north star, that this is what we want to be as an individual, as an organization, and hence, what do I want to stop doing, what do I want to start, and what should I continue? And sort of this one framework, incredibly helpful, simple. And in subsequent coaching interactions that I have been a coach, internal coach in Tata Power or in any other organization, I have used this, right? It is so, let's say, straightforward, that yes, define a goal, and to achieve that goal, what should you start, what should you stop doing, and what should you continue doing? So it's kind of, let's say, quote unquote, common sense, difficult to practice and stick to it, but I think articulating it made a huge difference, that yes, we are pinning it down to 2 3 things that you want to start, not like 15 things, few things that will make a difference. That I think was very helpful. And just to add to what you said, uh, it was very, I felt that making notes and sharing it was the essential for kind of the continuity of, see, we had close, it was not just a one-off interaction or two, it was over, I think, close to 18 months, sort of, if I remember,
Yes,
right?
18 months, correct.
18 months. So it was not a, it was a deep exercise. It was not just 2 3 interactions, and we can kind of close off with that. It was 18 months, a fairly long time, and we had close to 10 interactions, if I remember, 10 to 12 interactions.
Yeah, about a dozen interactions, correct.
Dozen interactions, yes. So maybe once in 1.5 months or once in a month, we used to interact. So uh, going through that and maintaining that, what is it that we are moving towards, capturing some of the lessons, sharing it with you, internalizing it myself, I think it was generally very helpful for me. Uh, though I don't yet practice journaling as much as I would like, but
Right.
in these kind of, in this 18-month process, keeping that notes and continuity, I think that was very, very helpful. So that rigor, that kind of discipline, I think was essential for me to get effective output from the whole coaching experience.
No, no, thank you for sharing that. And I know Smita has come in with some comments in the chat. What I do also want to emphasize here, Ganesh, to those who are listening in, is that coaching and mentoring is not it's not like a lesson that you walk into a classroom and suddenly you receive wisdom in textbooks. It's an interactive process which has to happen over a period of time, right? Now, what is that period of time? I mean, you can concentrate that if you wanted to just deliver, let's say, a dozen leadership lessons, you can do that in a capsule format in 1 month, and you walk away. That's not the way it happens. It has to be a longer term process. So those of you who are thinking about it, whether it's in organizations or individually, think about finding a mentor or a coach. And I want to just put a little definition in there as well and ask him to validate this, ask Ganesh to validate this, is that you must think of it as an ongoing, continuous process which drives change. What do you stop? What behavioral things and what managerial habits you stop? What do you start because of the context in which you're in? And what do you continue because you need to continue some things which are good? And in the context which you're in, some things you cannot. You have to stop them. So I'd encourage you to think about that in terms of a longer term, framework of building your own leadership skills or your organization thinking about leadership skills. I want to just use a segue as well, Ganesh, to ask you another question. Right? See, in between your roles, the various roles you've had and you've now progressed very nicely to becoming a senior leader. You moved on from Tata Power, of course, into being the president, of transmission and distribution at KEC. What were those lessons that you not only learned during our interactions, but what is it of lasting value that you continue to pick out of Tata? Because here is where I want to introduce the concept of organization culture. There's some organizations which are very amenable to becoming a learning organization, learning and training organization, right? I came from one which was phenomenal, which was HUL. It used to be called HLL in my time. Ganesh came from Tata, which is very, very, it considers training and development, leadership development as an integral part of the process. I moved on to HCL, which did a similar thing. And there are organizations who do that. And some organizations happen to get along quite nicely without it or keep it below the surface, right? So there's a culture which is very important, and culture doesn't happen overnight. It has to be built. I'm sure, I'm talking of the Tatas who I had no experience of, but go back to Durab Tata, go back to Jamshedji Tata, and then whatever people did, JRD did after that, and Ratan Tata did after that, helped establish that culture. So we want to talk a little bit about that and then talk about how you moved into KEC and continued some of that, and what aspects of your leadership did you have to adapt given the culture of the organization and Tata and the culture of the organization where you are today?
Yeah. So I think just to start off on that element that you mentioned on Tata's, I think the emphasis is on whenever we want to make any change happen in an organizational setting, business setting, etc. The focus on it sounds a little cliched, but unfortunately it is important. Is the people, right? The focus on capability and process, because I think sometimes maybe it can go in the other direction or overcompensate, I can say. But the tendency is always that to get an outcome, we have to work on the people and the process, right? Then the outcome becomes much easier to achieve and more sustainable, right? So a lot of time and like our experience, sort of, as you mentioned, for all the senior leaders, 30 of us actually went through this 2 year, close to 2 year leadership development program through IIM Ahmedabad and through the coaching experience. And that 2 year window kind of gave us the time, like as you said, we met once in 1.5 months. Now, the time in between was in a way actually useful for applying what we discussed. It's not just bam, 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 we go through 4 sessions in 4 weeks and there isn't enough time to absorb, there isn't enough time to implement it. So it gave some space. Sometimes it was good that we could afford that in our business context. I don't know, it may not be possible in every context, but that I think made a huge difference, that in that 18 months we were able to absorb, implement, course correct, tweak it. And that was the luxury of time, kind of gave us that advantage, right? That's number one. But the hypothesis is that essentially building that foundation is required to succeed in the long run, right? That investment of 18 months, 24 months, whatever it is, maybe it's a year, maybe it's 6 months in different contexts, that investment in people is essential if we want to change or if we want to move from one orbit to the other. So that's like number one. Number two is Tata has been a big believer in business excellence, business processes. We have in Tata's, we had the Tata Business Excellence Framework. It's based on the Baldrige Business Excellence Model. And every company gets assessed by a group of peers from other companies, other Tata companies, and they assess you on strategy, organization, business processes, HR processes. So the whole, all elements that are required for sustainable business success. So I think these are the two pillars: the people investment and the process investment, right? Now, KEC, in a lot, the reason why the reason why I joined KEC, part of the RPG group, is it has many of the elements which are similar in nature to the Tatas, right? Of course, it's a bit smaller than the Tata group in scale, but essentially the group believes in people. In fact, one of the main emphasis is on what we call as happiness, that ultimately an employee has to be happy, happy in the sense of being, to be productive, to be engaged, to create a conducive environment for teamwork, collaboration. the state of mind is important. So there's a lot of
Right.
emphasis on happiness in the RPG group, and we have a huge focus on safety and quality, right? Essentially, the respect for people. I think right
Right.
from the chairman down, the respect for individuals is something that is very
Very high.
similar to what we have in the Tata. So I think these are the two elements. But of course, it's a different cup of tea for me as an individual. I am much closer to. We are, Tata is also a listed company. Our KEC is also a listed company. Uh, the role that I'm in, the impact of the results on the let's say the stock performance is much more direct than the role that I was in Tata. So that is an element, the impact of quarterly results and how one has to just navigate through that. I think that has been a learning experience for me, which was not there for me in the Tatas. The secondly, the scale that which I'm operating. I was operating in Delhi. Here it's a global role. I have projects running in Middle East, in East Asia Pacific, India, of course, Africa, Eastern Europe. So uh, keeping track of things in Delhi, 500 square kilometers, much easier than 50 to 60 projects, safety standards across, quality standards, the how do I keep track of on-time performance across 50 to 60 projects spread across, totally different cup of tea. So I had to adapt myself, or I would say still in that WIP, work in process, learning mode. But these are
Right.
some of the elements that are different in the new role.
No, that's very well explained. I mean, you look, you can move companies, and but you have to also look at cultural compatibility, right?
Yeah.
Leadership doesn't, work in a vacuum. You can take a brilliant leader in one organization, put him in her or him into another culture, and the person will be a total failure because the culture doesn't support the kind of leader. And that, and no matter how good a leader you are, if you transplant a leader into a culture that is alien and antithetical to that person's capabilities, there can be a major dissonance and therefore problems that kind of emerge from there, right? I mean, thankfully in this case, it was a very smooth transition that happened for you. But also for the purpose of those who are listening in here, I do want to also emphasize that when we talk about leadership, we are trying to equip future leaders, including leaders like Ganesh, and you're already a leader, and those of you who are emerging onto a leadership, let me say, stage or a platform, that you can develop leadership capabilities, which is also the emotional side of being able to, work well with people. But coaching sometimes must also, that can be very domain specific. And we never covered that in our part because our discussion was more about the higher level leadership qualities. But I do, given the fact that you've worked on the engineering side as an engineer, and you work with McKinsey in terms of the consulting side, and you run businesses on the operating side. I do want to tell everybody, and I'd like your thoughts also on this, Ganesh, is that when you are coached, sometimes you need to be coached in a specific domain. There could be a finance domain, and there are people who should be, especially a leadership role. If you are not conversant with finance, then you should be coached. There's a finance for non-finance, there's a marketing for non-marketing, there is HR for non-HR. Though I think everybody who's a leader has to be an HR leader. There's no question about it. As I said, human capital is to me much more valuable than financial capital or even production or anything else that you do, whether it's on a shop floor or in an IT or in a virtual kind of situation. So the emphasis on coaching, which can be narrow, and when I say narrow, it's not a pejorative term. By narrow, I mean specific skills to deliver specific result areas, is very different from an overall leadership, though you can see one as sitting below the other. Because if you don't have those basic skills, you can't just be a leader philosophizing about how your organization should be or how the world should be. It has to be built on a foundation. And that foundational coaching is very important. And I'm sure Coach Arya has things to tell you about that, as much as leadership which sits on top. That's a point that I do want to make, and maybe I'd like you to respond to it as well, Ganesh.
Yeah, absolutely. The domain knowledge, whether it is on the industry or the function, as you mentioned, ultimately, credibility of the leader is kind of starts from having that strength, knowing the sector or knowing the industry, knowing the functional aspects of it. I think that is the foundation. And uh, if there, of course, one can't be an all rounder in all aspects. So, as you rightly said, for me as an individual. Uh, I was reasonably comfortable in finance or in some of
Correct.
other aspects, right? But maybe the I was not a hardcore electrical engineer per se. There were certain elements of the role that required better understanding of the technical aspects of power transmission or power distribution. Now, being I think something that has stayed with me is not being too affected by what will others think if I ask a dumb question, right?
Hmm.
Or what I think is dumb or what I think is too basic to be asked by the senior leader, right? Am I assumed to know this, or uh, especially I think the first 1.5 years in the new role kind of gives you that license to ask without much of fear of judgment, right? So I think that is a one way to offset that gap that you will have in any new role, any new transition. There will be elements that are unknown where you are expected to know that. The second is treating your colleagues or the team members that you work with who are domain experts with the respect
Hmm.
that they deserve, and being open that something that is not you're not confident about or not knowing it. I think that is something that at least has helped me to navigate these situations, because it is not possible for somebody to know everything about that area. Third, I think there are experts in the industry, whether it is ex senior leaders in the organization, others who have either superannuated or in other companies. So we have to figure out some combination of
Hmm.
tactics
Hmm.
to get up to speed on the industry aspect or the functional aspects that need strengthening. But on the generic aspects that you mentioned, yes, the coaching experience will definitely help to put that polish or put that overall package. But
Correct.
foundation is the functional or the industry aspect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. And, I'm going to allow Smita at some point to interrupt us and tell us when we are ready for questions. But as I come to that, I mean, these were some broad principles that I tried to lay, and I'm just going to try and summarize some of these before I throw open another question for us to, or another aspect for us, all of us to discuss. So, what I want to emphasize here is that there is a process. Firstly, there must be a need. There must be a need that someone has to define. That need could come from the leader herself or himself. There can be an organizational, transition happening. I mean, many organizations which I work with or I'm on the board of are always worrying about who next, right? We're all, at the end of the day, we are all in a finite existence. We all have a life, a lifespan, which organizationally, I mean, and of course, overall, and then it's always something we need to move on to. So, organization has to feel that, and then the organization or the individual then has to agree that leadership or coaching first, and then a mentorship towards leadership is required. And then they've got to agree the process by which you're going to do it. Do you hire an organization? You hire individuals? What tools and processes you need to use? Is it long term? What's the feedback loop? So there are a bunch of what I would call hard, aspects which an HR system must be comfortable with, familiar with, and wants to stoke the development of human capital. And I couldn't emphasize this enough. Without human capital, no organization can survive. And in India, and I want to talk a little bit about it, is that we live in a very thriving economy despite whatever's happening. I mean, I know people talk about joblessness, people talk about structural issues in the Indian economy, but you know what? India is a land of enormous entrepreneurship. We are a land of dukandars. And when I say dukandar, it's not a pejorative or a demeaning term. We have people starting businesses everywhere, from the guy who's repairing a cycle to the fellow who's serving you tea on a pavement. I mean, she or he's an entrepreneur. The people selling vegetables and taking Paytms or Google Pay into their bank accounts. There is a huge, what I would call a leadership requirement there. Now, we are not catering to that, but what I'd encourage everybody to think about leadership, not just in an organizational context in which we are discussing, Ganesh and I, but think about how you can pass some of that on to your domestic help, your driver, the vegetable vendor, a shopkeeper who you meet. I mean, I started my work with HUL, and I remember I learned enormously as a 21-year-old from the shopkeeper, the Kirana shop. There were no modern trade and supermarkets at the time that I was started out my career. But it is something that I think we all need to transmit and help develop. So before Smita kind of intervenes and says, hey, listen, you got to answer a couple of questions, I want to ask you, Ganesh, are there leaders, and I'm sure you've encountered many, and I'll talk about a few of the ones that I've encountered, who you felt genuinely inspired you, and they need not be people you've always worked with. I mean, I'm sure there are people you worked with who have impacted your life because of personal interaction, but others as well. Maybe one or two examples of those who had a transformational experience on your development as a leader.
Yeah. So I think I had the fortune to work with some very senior leaders in the Tata Group. So that I would lean on some of those experiences. One particular individual that was really inspiring was my first boss in Tata Power, Mr. Anil Sardana. He was the first CEO of the Delhi Distribution Company, which started the privatization experience in 2002, right? And even after 20 years, people in the Delhi subsidiary, which eventually I became the CEO when we had our interactions, uh, remember the time. It was only 3 years that he spent in Delhi being the CEO of that company. People still
Right.
remembered after 20 years the changes that he had brought in, the culture that he had set or he had kind of set up, and he got the things moving in the right direction, the momentum of which kind of was felt even after 20 years, right? So I think that was amazing to see impact of one individual. Even folks in the Delhi government after 20 years were speaking about him and the changes that he brought and the enormous goodwill that the organization earned because of his 3 to 5 years at.
Right.
So I think that kind of impact is very, very obviously inspiring. And I had the good fortune of working directly with him in my when I joined Tata Power actually.
Okay. I'll give a couple of quick examples for what it's worth for those who are on the online right now. I look back at HUL, or levers as we've always called it, as a factory of leaders. It's generated so many leaders across different domains in consulting and finance, and very few people probably know or remember a person called Prakash Tandon, who came one of the first Indian chairman out of levers. He actually wrote the in the Tandon Committee report on working capital, right? So he came and talked about the finance. Then there was a VG Rajadhyaksh who went to the planning commission, right? There was Dr. Ashok Ganguly, the first Indian or the first, non-white to get onto the board of Unilever and make a huge mark. He wrote a tremendous book thereafter called After This. And then bunch of interesting people, Vindi Banga, Harish Manwani, who went on to become CEO. In each particular case, I learned so much from them, even with brief interaction, either working directly or even exposure to them, that their whole approach always was to say, what is that imprint I can leave on you, which you can take forward as a leader? But I think if I were to count one person and one individual who had a seminal influence on my life, and I would say he literally changed my life into becoming a late-age entrepreneur and running my fund, among other things, is Shiv Nadar. Many of you have heard of him, and those of you who have not, he's I think the third or the fourth richest man in India, but it's not the wealth I'm talking about. The wealth is an outcome of his brilliance, his entrepreneurial brilliance. Never sought the limelight. He said, my work should speak for itself. And not only did he make money, but he deployed that money into philanthropic causes, which he continues to do today, and his family continues the tradition. So leadership, as I learned from him, was not an in-your-face leadership. It can have various manifestations. So there's no one size fits all. And that's one of the messages I want to leave behind with all of you. And one final thought, and since you're an engineer and very steeped in technology, before we take any one or two questions, Smita, which we will leave to you to finally help us wind up, is the role of AI and leadership. You know, in an age of AI, is the mentor-mentee relationship or the coach-coachee relationship doomed? Everybody says, you know, AI will eat all jobs. AI will have nothing left for anybody to do. And you know, at the end of the day, even a seminar like this can be run by AI, by bots, and by deep fakes, which look like me and you, or like Smita. Much harder to make it look like Smita, of course, and take over all these answers. So you pose a question, the AI machine or the robot answers that. What do you think about it? And there are tools, by the way. Anybody can Google it. I don't want to get into a theoretical session here, but it can do a lot in terms of decision making, support, and all of that. Even emotional intelligence, provided you're open to it. Any thoughts on that as we conclude?
Right.
Ganesh?
No, of course, there's a lot of uncertainty about usage of AI, but I actually, in my, have been using it more uh, as a way to, it actually excites a lot of team members to work on applications, improvements, particularly in a retail setup where you're dealing with close to, let's say, 20, 30, or 2, 3 million customers, right? The AI actually gives a huge opportunity for delivering services which are not been possible so far, in a way, or in a manner that has it's so much more creative. So actually, I find that using AI, rather than it being a hangover of a stress, or that it will take up my job kind of stuff, uh, actually, most organizations that I have interacted, and since I also talk to a lot of my peers, it actually helps to motivate the team, create engagement on doing something new. Ultimately, teams and individuals want, what is it new that I'm doing? What is the impact that I'm creating? What is cool? It gives an outlet for us to experiment, right? So ultimately, I am quite excited that AI will help us
Yeah.
to do more. Yes, there is an impact on jobs. There will be an impact on costs. But if I look at it from a leader's perspective, it is immensely helpful that there is something for us to do, cutting edge. There is an opportunity for us to do something new and play around with it in some sense. So it creates that buzz, it creates that excitement. That's the way I look at it.
Thank you, Ganesh. I mean, over to you, Smita.
Yes, thank you so much. We've heard of some of these topics like trust, listening, all that, which is part of our coaching curriculum as well. But when you start giving real life experiences, the understanding of those concepts become so much better. So I have a question, but before that, I will take Cindy's question here. And she says, what was your learning or insights about yourself? And this question is to Saurav. I would love to hear from your perspective. So, Saurav, you did share some of your learnings, but in order to answer to that question, would you like to, just take it?
So what did I learn out of the process, right? What is
Yeah.
in the interaction? So
Yes.
I tell you what, I want to make this clear to everybody that a mentor or a coach or even a classroom teacher or a professor, and two of my children are professors. One's about to be one, and one's already a professor. Nobody, it's not a one-way process. You learn from it. So what did I learn from Ganesh? Plenty. I learned the power of, first I learned to listen to him, and he learned to listen to me. So I learned the power of being a good listener. When you listen, 2x, twice amount of what you speak, you get a lot out of it, number one. Number two is, I think you take away many learnings. From Ganesh, I learned how to think and document very systematically. I was always reasonable, I thought, in that process, but Ganesh was exceptional. He documented things like a true engineer, like a true McKinsey guy, right? And that made my process so much easier. And I could be that much more productive. And finally, I think the biggest learning I got out of it is how I saw Ganesh evolve. And the fact that he's successful right now, having moved from being a regional CEO, as he said, within a 500 square kilometer geographic domain, to now controlling a global business, gives me such enormous pride that it helps you feel that you've achieved something, and maybe you can transmit some of that learning to the next person there. So it's an interactive process, right? It is about learning as much from your mentee or your coachee as it is about giving back.
Thanks,
I don't
thanks,
know if
Saurav.
that answered the question, but
Yeah, absolutely. It answered more and beyond to just that question, Saurav. Thank you so much. We are on time, but just one question on, organizations are now believing in creating more of the relationship of mentor-mentee, coach-coachee, whatever we want to call it. What do you think is the organizational benefit by doing that? Like either of you, like whoever, both of you are really talking the plus of this, right? So what is your take on this?
Ganesh,
Yeah. So I think huge positive is, of course, the I think there's a lot of tacit knowledge that the organizational leaders have in navigating career paths, in navigating transitions, in navigating difficult situations. I think rather than uh, everybody going through that learning curve right from the beginning, the coaching or the mentoring interaction helps. Of course, the individual has to take that step, but it speeds up that process. So from the organizational perspective, you are able to develop leaders in a faster way, and you can see the benefit of that in the growth of the organization through that individual also growing in that process. So I would say that is the short answer to your question, Smita.
Yeah. All right. Okay, keeping the time in mind, thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Saurav and Ganesh, thank you so much for your, insights and wisdom, and it really becomes much more insightful when you pick up, examples from your own actual experience. Right? So thank you so much,
thank
and
you.
see you all next week, next
Thank
Thank
you,
Wednesday.
you.
everyone. Thank
Thank
you.
Thank
you,
you.
everybody,
Thank you.
for. Thank you, Saurav. Thank you, Smita. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.